Hey, this is Madeline Sklar.
And Suze Cooper, and you're listening to All Things Audio.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to All Things Audio with me and Suze Cooper. It's interesting that January was such a light month. There wasn't really much going on, I guess, because of the new year, right? I know at the end of the year, these platforms, I guess their employees were taking time off, and normally we see so many updates with Spaces and Clubhouse and everything in the social audio world. And it's been very light lately. So it's interesting that things have kind of slowed down. But there are some new things that we're going to talk about today. So I'm excited for us to dive in and share. And as always, Suze and I record this as a podcast. So we'll take your speaker request a little later. What we're going to do right now is go through all of the latest social audio news that we've come across, talk about it a bit, and then we'll let you know when we're ready to take your mic request. You can come join us and share your 2 cents or ask a question. We'll make it a fun conversation.
We certainly will. Yeah, I think it feels like the Twitter product team obviously had time off. I think they kind of broke for Christmas a little bit earlier than expected. And there was kind of that build up to that last update just before everything shut down for Christmas. And it does really feel like it's taken a while for everyone to get back up to steam. And I guess the other thing is that we're now in this phase of Twitter Spaces as a feature where they're really building on things. So I think from here on in, the different iterations and the different tweaks that we see aren't perhaps going to be quite as massive as we were hanging around and waiting for before. You know, we were all looking forward to being able to record and what that might look like and what the replays would be like and all of those kind of things. And so I think in terms of what we understand Twitter have got lined up, there's nothing that's kind of as massive as that kind of ultimate shift that we were waiting for before Christmas in those months leading up to the end of last year. So I think that's where we're kind of getting into a bit more of an even keel in terms of the actual features and functionalities here on Twitter. But certainly there's loads of stuff happening in general in the world of social audio. And this space has always been really around that whole idea of, what is social audio? How can we use it? And so, we'll just dive into talking about all the other different spaces where people are using audio to connect with one another.
The first bit of news comes from Adweek that Twitter and the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences are teaming up for the 94th Annual Academy Awards. And super interesting that they're hosting a series of exclusive weekly Twitter Spaces. I don't know about you, Suze, but I've noticed lately Twitter Spaces is exploding. I can't get over how many more rooms I'm seeing just constantly, and the rooms are growing. They're like bigger and bigger. I'm seeing bigger brands jumping on the bandwagon now. It's a lot happening over there.
Yeah, it's funny you should say that actually, because in terms of the bigger brands, we're definitely seeing that. It really doesn't seem to have filtered yet down into perhaps smaller businesses. I think are still kind of wondering whether or not it's okay to create a branded space and to do anything that's kind of related to their business and what they do potentially. But definitely in terms of these partnerships and these big names, we're seeing a lot more that are popping up since the beginning of the year. And I think this is fantastic. I mean, what a great way to build a buzz around the Oscars. They've obviously had, created this great partnership with Twitter in general. It's not just around Spaces. They've got a hashtag. They're going to be asking people to vote. There's, the opportunity that your tweet might appear during the Oscars broadcast. So it's obviously a really good kind of partnership for Twitter to have with the Academy. But just fantastic to hear that they're thinking of actually using social audio as a way where fans can connect with one another, discuss the nominees, talk about the titles that might be worthy of the best film, and, even potentially hear from the actors and critics, the hosts and presenters themselves. I just think it's such a great way of really leveraging this new tech to build that community and connection around a big event.
I agree. I'm super excited about this. I love that they're wanting to make the conversation so inclusive by having this in Spaces. I think that's super cool. Like, as a fan of these films and nominees, to be able to go and be a part of a conversation where they're going to bring special guests like some of the actors, critics, hosts, and presenters into these spaces. Super interesting. I just love seeing more of this develop in the spaces, part of the platform on Twitter. I'm also reading up on, I wish I'd saved the tweet so I could put it in here right now, but a few days ago I saw that Twitter is really working to get more journalists utilizing spaces, just more publications to have conversations. And so we're starting to see that come about more and more. And, since you've been out the last few weeks, Suze, I've been really fully immersed in the whole NFT world. I find it super fascinating. The whole Web3, well, it should be no surprise to anybody because I was an early adopter to Web 1.0 and Web 2.0. So Web3, of course, no shock that I'm jumping all over this. But what I've seen is that in the NFT world is just totally all about Twitter and Discord, but really utilizing the power of spaces with conversations. And I'm meeting so many amazing people through spaces that are just having these conversations about NFT, the blockchain, and Web3. Actually, a guy that I met in one of these spaces a few weeks ago invited me to come be his guest yesterday in his space, having me come on to talk about social media and marketing in the Web 2 world versus the Web 3 world, and super interesting. So I love that Spaces is growing. That for the longest time it was so dominated by Clubhouse, and Clubhouse is still, I think, doing fairly well. They're not going away anytime soon. They're still a great big audience over there. Lots going on, but it's just really, we're seeing that social audio is really thriving on these platforms right now. And of course, we've been hearing about LinkedIn starting their new live audio platform. It's a little slow going, but I feel like it's going to do really well on LinkedIn. LinkedIn just seems like a great platform for audio conversations. Wouldn't you agree, Suze?
Yeah, I really do. And, the little that I've been over there in an audio event, I did enjoy it. And I do think it's got some advantages actually over Spaces in terms of the way that we're presented within the audio kind of room, the way that we can see who each other are, the way we can build connections. So I'm really excited to see what LinkedIn's going to do and how much further it's going to go. I need to spend more time over there really and really dive into it fully to understand exactly how it can be used. I mean, I think the thing, as with Twitter, you've already got a community there. On LinkedIn, you've already got that foundation of people that you're connected to. And all it does, it's an enhancer for building those connections even further and really cementing them. So I think in terms of adding social audio as a feature to any of these social platforms, it's only going to strengthen those communities and relationships that you're building while being on that platform anyway, which is great. I want to pick up on the point you said about more journalists using Spaces though, because one of the things that I have been listening into over the last couple of weeks is a group called Tortoise Media, who are an independent broadcaster over here. They're a news provider. And what they're doing is actually hosting their news meetings live on Twitter each day. So you can actually jump in and listen to their journalists talking about the stories that they've got on their agenda, kind of going deep into different ways that they might look at that story, different ideas and threads that are coming out of it. And again, really building a community around it. They have got a subscription model, and I have subscribed to it, and it allows kind of early access to their podcast episodes. They create a lot of audio content. They created the recent series Sweet Bobby, which was gripping listening and really, really interesting. So it's real kind of deep journalism. The idea of Tortoise is that they're slow news. But the other thing that they've got going for them is just this idea that they want to build the community, and that the news, those people who are affected by it, should be included in it as it happens, kind of thing. So the idea of having been involved in news conferences and news meetings as a journalist myself over a number of years, the idea of kind of putting that out there and actually bringing people in. And they actually, in non-COVID times, invite people into the office to sit in and join in with these meetings too. So this is a great way of leveraging something that they'd sort of an idea they'd come up with, but making use of social audio to make sure that it can continue in these times when people haven't been able to meet face to face so much. So yeah, really interesting way of using spaces, and let's see more of it.
Exactly. And so there's been a little bit of news with Clubhouse, interesting stuff going on over there. I love that Clubhouse is still doing well, still thriving. People are using it. I mean, it's not like it's a big competition and only one platform is going to win the social audio game. I feel like the more the merrier. But Clubhouse is working on a room chat feature. Do you know much about that?
Yeah, so from what I can see on this, at the moment, they created their back channel feature, and you can kind of DM anyone else that is in the same room as you and have that kind of private conversation as a back channel. This looks as though it's going to be an actual room chat. So kind of think like Zoom. You're on a big Zoom call, lots of other people that you can see, but you've also got that chat window where whatever you put in, everybody can see and respond to and type into the text box. So I kind of think, I felt as though chat features, when social audio first came out, people started saying, oh, we need a chat box. And I was a bit kind of like in two minds about it, because do we need a chat feature if we're all actually talking? I mean, yeah, I wasn't quite sure it was needed. However, once the back channel arrived on Clubhouse, it can be useful for just kind of flicking a comment to your mate who, if you've not got the mic, you're not going to have that conversation together. Myself and Morgan, who's usually joins our space, sometimes we'll be on the town hall or whatever and ping each other a message about what they've just said. And that it is an addition to what you can do while you're on there. Do you need a room chat while you're on there? I don't know. What do you feel about it, Madeline? I mean, we don't have chat over here, but then Twitter is kind of its own chat in itself, isn't it? So
yeah, I don't know. I'm a little conflicted about it as well. I'm just not so sure. Like, is it really necessary? I don't know. It's a good question. I mean, look, I'm all for features. Like, give us as many features as possible, because some people like having lots of options, and it's probably something I wouldn't use, but it would still be okay to have. You never know.
I guess what it does is it fosters the community and the conversation that can be had without having the microphone. So for those people who are listeners, it allows you to kind of become part of it without needing to take the mic. And I guess also for a host, if you were to spot that someone had sparked off a great comment in the chat or whatever, you could then invite that person to come up and join in. So yeah, I can definitely see pros to it. I also feel like, I love the fact that I can tap into an audio space, or any social audio, and just listen in, and I don't have to be looking at the screen, and I don't have to be thinking about, or I can type something or whatever. I like that distance.
Me too. And that's typically how I listen. That's how I consume a lot of the content. I'll just have it on while I'm working. Like, I'm just listening. So I'm not looking at my screen. I'm not paying attention to, the emojis and things like that. So, so that's why I said I probably wouldn't use a feature like this, because it's not usually the way I utilize social audio. I'm usually just listening while I'm doing something else.
So that's really interesting, because I've actually found that I will tap into a social audio event anywhere, wherever it might be, Clubhouse, Twitter Spaces, whatever, in space of where I used to listen to the radio. So I might put the radio on while I was working. Now I will try and, I'll find a space that I'm interested in, or I'll listen to a replay, which is usually the way of doing it. But I think as well, what you've kind of touched on there is the fact that there are different ways that people will consume this. So you've got the completely passive way where you're just going to listen in and you've got no intention of kind of requesting the mic or taking part in the actual conversation. You're just there and happy to listen. Then you've got that kind of full on, I want to be involved in this conversation. I've requested the mic. I'm hoping the host is going to bring me up. I've got something to say and I'm desperate to say it, that kind of thing, where you're real kind of lean into that content. And I guess what a chat gives you is a middle ground between those two. You're not totally passive to it, but you're not there desperate to talk either, but it gives you that kind of middle ground. So yeah, in talking this through, maybe I can see a place for it. And as you say, all features are welcome. Let's see how they go. Let's use them and then we'll work out what they're for and how we're going to use them, because that's what we've done all the way along with all of this stuff.
Exactly. And then there is an article, a Forbes article that was really interesting about social audio that you found. And just an FYI, this is kind of cool. It's very meta. So Chris, the social audio guy, is here live in our room in Spaces. And when I was searching for a tweet to put in the nest, I happened to find his when really quick little Twitter tip. If you take the URL, I wanted to find this particular Forbes article, I had the URL. You put the URL into the search box and you can see who's tweeted that link. So a nice little Twitter hack. And the first one that popped up was Chris, the social audio guy. So I thought, I will share his tweet in the nest because it's the article that we're referencing now. So nice little side note, kind of meta and kind of cool, huh?
I love that. I definitely need to get a little sonic for Madeline's Twitter hacks. Ding! That's amazing. So you can literally search on a URL and see who else has pushed it out. Brilliant.
Uh-huh.
That's very cool.
Isn't that neat? It's like one of those little known things that people don't know. But, just the little backstory, what Susan and I do is, we find articles and resources and things to discuss week to week. And we put it into Notion that we share. Very much like a Google Doc, but we really like Notion. And so Sue's had this Forbes article talking about the rise and fall of social audio. And I just clicked on the URL, popped it into the Twitter search in the little search bar, and it will go find the tweets for that article with that URL. And I always try to find the tweet from the actual source. I was trying to see if Forbes had a tweet, but when I saw Chris, I'm like, well, he's always here. That'll be a nice little surprise. We'll use his tweet in the nest, and we'll also have it in the show notes for those that are listening to the podcast version of this.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, I mean, I picked up this this Forbes article. I mean, they're 10 a penny, aren't they? We see the rise and fall of social audio all the time. There's always someone that is covering whether or not this is going to fail. What I guess this one hooked me in on was the fact that it says it's not going to fail. It's got legs. It's going to hang around for about the next decade or so. But that there are two things that will need addressing in order for it to stay. The first being privacy, and the second being the platform's relationships with the creators. And I found that quite interesting. I still am of the opinion that with privacy, it's something that we read a lot about and it feels like it's pulled apart in the media and online and everything else. But when it comes to the crunch, I think a lot of us overlook perhaps the privacy downsides in favour of the good stuff that we can get off the other side of it. So whether or not that's a true deal breaker for people basically in using the social audio platforms, I think kind of has yet to be seen. But in terms of those relationships with creators, I mean, we've seen things like the Creators Fund, the Spark Fund, all of those kind of things pop up in different places. And it feels like each of the main social audio platforms have really tried it. I mean, we've obviously had Twitter's got a support for creators. Clubhouse did one as well. Even Green Room did one for a bit, although we never got any announcement around who they were supporting because I'm not quite sure, whether or not they had enough people even that were kind of pushing themselves forward to take up those places. But it's interesting that this particular Forbes article suggests that will be a real, game changer in terms of ensuring that the creators are empowered and happy to continue and feel supported by the platform. That is a key to making sure that this really does continue kind of over the years.
It's interesting how we see a lot of articles like this talking about, the rise and fall of social audio and how it's impacting us. But yeah, it just the little bit I could read, it looked like a really good take on it.
I mean, the other thing that they point out as well is that actually it will be the entertainment sector and the media that really, really run with social audio. And I think that just takes us back full circle to our top story, which is around the Oscars and, the spaces that they're going to be spinning up around this year's Oscars. So, and I think they're kind of right. It does lend itself to that kind of Ents sector, really. So interesting to see who else will jump on board and keep it running.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. Well, I'll tell you what's been interesting since I've been so immersed in the NFT space is a lot of the influencers and celebrities that are involved with NFTs are utilizing Twitter Spaces and having really great conversations. I was tuning into one, I think it was yesterday, Reese Witherspoon was there. And you're starting to get, Eva Longoria has been doing some. I've been in a couple of hers that she's been a part of. And I think that's attractive to people, like being able to be that fly on the wall and listen into these conversations with industry leaders, movers and shakers, as well as celebrities. That's why I think, our first story talking about Spaces and Twitter teaming up with the Motion Picture Academy, for the Oscars. I think that's super exciting. I think a lot of people are just going to love being a part of that and be able to utilize Spaces for something like that, and being part of those conversations, because we all want to be in conversations with like-minded people. That's why social audio is so popular. Just like we're all gathered here today to talk about social audio news. Obviously, you all have an interest in that. That's why you're here today with us to be a part of this conversation. So I think that's been such a driving force with the popularity of social audio, is that you're able to find your community and your people that you can have like-minded conversations with.
And what I find really interesting is that in the same way, you're saying there about being a fly on the wall and listening to, these celebrities that you might be interested in, their take on whatever subject it is. That's the same reason that I might listen to a podcast with them as a guest. Yet, when you listen into a social audio space, you do feel like you have more of a connection and like there's more of a potential for interaction there. And I guess because it's live and because generally podcasts, have been edited in some way, and, you're hearing whatever the creator wants you to hear as opposed to kind of this live thought process. But yeah, that really fascinates me, the fact that it kind of could be just like listening to a podcast, but it isn't when you're in a social audio space. You do feel like you're part of an event and part of something that's happening. And I love that. It's just a weird phenomenon in my brain because it should feel the same.
It's cool. It's really cool. I mean, I love tuning in when Twitter Spaces hosts they try to do a weekly Q&A / community discussion and sharing like what's the latest with Spaces. And then they open up the room so you could request a mic and ask questions. And you're talking to the people who have built Twitter Spaces and the people that are making the changes, and they're listening to the things that we're asking for to improve on it. And it's like, who wouldn't want to be able to have their ear and tell them like, hey, this is what I think, and I would love if you could have it do this, this, and that. Like, that's, I think, what's so powerful about having this social audio. Live stream was such a big deal years back when it first really got going. Like, it's been around a long time. I was doing live streaming like over 10 years ago when I was in the music business putting on live events, and I'd be sitting on the front row with all my computer and techie equipment, recording it as a live stream. And it was not great quality, but it was fun and it was interactive, but it was only interactive because you had a chat room. So people could, talk about what they're watching on the screen, but it's just not the same when we look at where we're at today with social audio, that we can all just be wherever we're at around the world right now and be plugged in through our phone and talk to each other and have meaningful conversations. That's so incredibly powerful.
It really is. It really is.
And we want to hear from you all that are here. We're done with the news now. So go ahead and request the mic if you'd like to come on stage and share your thoughts on any of this stuff. Maybe you have something new you found out about you want to share with us, or just comment on anything in the world of social audio. We'd love to hear from you. Hey, Ron, how's it going?
Hey, Madeline. Hi, Suze. I'd like to expand on something that Suze brought up that I think has a lot of potential, which is how the chat, if there were a chat feature, how chat could be used for people to flag that they have something important to say and that they have special knowledge about it. So let's imagine a large space. Say the space has 1,000 people in it, just to give teeth to this idea. Uh, and in those 1,000 people might be some of the world's foremost experts on the topic being discussed. And it doesn't work for them or anybody else for them to wait their turn to be called on. Right now, something is being said, and they don't need a 5 or 10 minute little speechlet, but they have something fascinating to say about it, and they're expert at it. If they could say in chat who they are and the special knowledge they have, they could get called on right away. And that is, this idea came to me through George Silverman. And to me, it sounds like a general solution that doesn't require any new technology other than the chat feature that lets people self-select for who should come next in priority because of their experience and knowledge.
I love that. I love that idea. See, the problem is right now with that in Spaces, we'll look at Spaces. I mean, this is separate from that Clubhouse room chat feature. Right now, if somebody's in here listening right now and like you got something really important, but you want to ask about it first, usually you DM the host. And I get that all the time. People will DM me and say, hey, I really have something important I would like to add. Is it okay? But, and first of all, I feel like if you've got something to add, just go ahead and request the mic. But we're in a smaller room. So what you say, Ron, makes sense for a big room. You got lots of people. It would be great if there was some kind of feature where you can basically have some kind of chat integrated that could go to the host or co-host where you could say, hey, I've got something perfect to talk about with what you're saying right now. Can I come on stage and talk about it? And being able to give them a little bit of information, because one of the things I notice with Spaces and with any of the, same thing on Clubhouse when I was over there, you're going to get people that want to come in rooms and disrupt it and talk about crazy random stuff, right? So it's always frustrating as a host when you see somebody requesting the mic who has no profile picture, who has no followers, that just popped up out of nowhere. And you're wondering, what is this person? Like, you don't want to dismiss people because they might have something really great to contribute, but most of the time is someone that's coming to disrupt. That's why their profile is so anonymous. It would be great if there was some kind of way to have a chat type of feature incorporated for the host and the co-host where we can almost like vet these people ahead of time. Like sometimes when I do see this weird random profile requesting the mic, sometimes I feel like I need to just DM them real quick and say, what do you want to talk about? Like, tell me real quick, what are your thoughts before I bring you on? So I can kind of vet them, because if they're coming to disrupt, they'll probably just like, whoa, I'm out of here. They're on to me. But that person might have something really great to contribute, and I don't want to dismiss them. So maybe they just do a quick little, yeah, I love what you're talking about, and I've got something really awesome to share about X, Y, and Z.
Or you, Madeline, you're a terrific moderator. So you could set the mode of moderation. You could say to the whole 1,000 people, here's how to get my attention and get priority. Say the following in chat. Don't do this, do this. You could tell them what you want in the chat. That would simplify everything that you just said. And then you just get to look through all those chats and see who has heard you and said something that should give them priority.
Yeah, I like that. What do you think, Suze? This is a really interesting conversation.
Yeah, I mean, I loved the fact that as I was talking earlier, I was almost kind of convincing myself that there's, a case for having the chat on there. Whereas I had kind of started out kind of going, I'm not sure if this is really a thing we need. But yeah, the more I hear what you're saying, I think you're right. Yeah, I mean, who knows who you might have in each space. And partly that's the excitement of joining a space, right? You don't know whether you're in there with the CEO of some massive corporation that's, got amazing stuff to say, or, someone who's got an experience that they're going to share that you're really going to connect with. That's the point of these things. So to understand and be able to alert other people in the social audio space that you've got that story to tell and you feel like this is the platform to do it and whatever is a great way to do it without having to request the mic or back channel on the DMs or whatever. So yeah, I'm definitely coming round to the idea.
Another thing it allows, and I learned this from watching Alan Dershowitz in his Dersh Show. He says to his audience, I don't censor anything. You put in chat whatever you want. It can be insulting, it can be dismissive, it can be attacking me and my ideas. I don't care. I'm going to read it, and I'm going to read it on the show. But then, you know what he does? It's so valuable to all we listeners. He clusters whatever it is, 2, 3, 4 people who are all talking to the same point. In other words, he's not taking the chat in time sequence. He's taking them by topic or theme or issue. And then he'll read the 3 comments that are all about the same issue, and he'll address them all as a group. Very nifty. And he can do that with the ordinary chat feature that already exists.
Thanks for sharing that with us, Ron. I love that idea.
You're welcome.
We got another speaker coming up, LGBTQIA in Spaces. Welcome. Thank you for being here with us.
Thanks for the platform. I've been listening for quite a while, in fact, and it's always a pleasure to come to your spaces. In fact, Madeline, I've been kind of following you for a while now as well. And yeah, I think it's so critical. It's so critical that we have these conversations and try to vet out what is standard practice, or rather what should be standard practice, so that we can improve the quality of the work that we do here on these platforms. So I set up this account for the purpose of just mobilizing the LGBTQ community on a global level. But my name is Sia. I'm more fondly known as Miss Sia. And I have an organization called TransWorks Global. And I just started it in December. And the idea is to have conversations on here, to create podcasts, YouTube channel content around conversations, that the community has to support their problems, issues, emergencies, whatever's happening, and mobilize resources where necessary. And also, wherever legal help is needed as well, to make sure people get that assistance. And I would say that my questions, or rather, if we are allowed to ask any questions, my questions would be more aimed at anyone who's open to answering around maybe marketing the platforms that we built to get more people to know what we're doing. Because with me right now, I've been doing this now since halfway through January 2022. And I've been hosting spaces, but I've also been participating in spaces, having conversations. It's been very successful so far, but I would prefer to have more people come through as well, so we can have more engaging conversations. And any tips would be appreciated. Thanks.
Well, thanks for joining us, Ms. Sia. Appreciate you being here with us, and great that you started that account to bring people together and doing, I see on here it says you're doing daily spaces, which is awesome. That's really great. I think the hard part is definitely getting people to come over. And it seemed like last year spaces had so many more people because people were still staying home. There was still some lockdowns going on. And it just seemed like that shift happened very quickly. Like it seemed like it was last summer, maybe. Suze, do you remember when that was? When all of us were building these rooms and spaces, and they were growing, getting so many people, and then it just kind of slowed way down because people were just getting back to their regular routines and their old lives. So it's always a challenge getting people over, and it is something I get asked a lot, especially since I've been doing Twitter marketing, social media marketing for so long, but especially Twitter. But it sounds like you're doing all the things right. You're hosting rooms regularly. Consistency is definitely key, so people know when to expect it. And then going to other people's rooms and, using that opportunity to chat in other places with other like-minded people, getting the opportunity to let them know about what it is you're doing, to try to encourage people to come over. And it's okay to tweet a lot about the rooms you're hosting to encourage people to come join. I co-host 3 separate rooms each week in Twitter Spaces, and I'm always tweeting about it to remind people because I don't want people to forget. So I want to make sure that is, very visible in my profile when you're going through the feed that like, oh, today is all things audio, and once I'm done with this room today, I'm going to go set up. I wish, one of my biggest wishes with Spaces that we could schedule multiple rooms, but we can't. So I'm not really promoting my room for tomorrow until we're done today. So as soon as we're done today, I can go set up the room, get the URL, and I'll be promoting the heck out of it because I want to make sure people know here's where you go, set a reminder, and come join us tomorrow for another great room. So it's just, making sure you're putting those tweets out there. And it's okay to go post and share on other platforms. It's okay to post it, elsewhere. It doesn't have to be just on Twitter. You can promote everywhere and let people know that this is what you're doing over in Spaces. So I hope that helps.
Yeah. I've actually seen the Pod News email newsletter, which is generally a podcast newsletter. It's a daily one. It's run by James Cridland, who's here on Twitter. You can find him. And he sometimes puts in his kind of scheduled events and things that are coming up, he will actually promote different spaces that are happening. So, that it's about kind of thinking a little bit sideways sometimes. We're sort of the sibling to podcasting on social audio, but potentially pitching to some of those podcast newsletters that might have kind of have your back in a way, might have the audience that you want to draw into your space, might be useful if it's just dropping a DM to someone who runs one of those particular newsletters and sort of explaining what you do and what you'd like to put into their newsletter and just see. People can only say no, can't they? And someone might say yes, and then it's perfect, and you've got your platform to try and draw more people in. Another thing I would say, and I always fall back on this, and I, as everybody knows, I'm absolutely rubbish at doing it myself, but create some voice tweets, because they do catch people's attention and they do hang around on your timeline for a bit longer than the other tweets do. They seem to have a bit more of a long lifespan. So yeah, potentially do some voice tweets before you're about to go live and send that out to just catch people's attention. Even if it's just because it looks different, it seems to stop people as they're scrolling because they want to know what it is. And by that time, you've already told them when your space is and what you're up to. So yeah, do kind of a really quick, succinct voice tweet that says, I'm going live in 10 minutes on Spaces. Make sure you're following me or follow this hashtag to find out more. Yeah, that's another thing I'd do.
I love that. That's such a great idea. And you could do the same thing with video too. Just, pull out your phone, make a quick little video, almost like an Instagram story. People don't think to do videos like that on Twitter, but that can be very effective and it can really stand out. So do a little video like, hey, come join us later today for our room in Twitter Spaces. And, it's that visual, letting them see you and getting them all excited about joining you for that. But Suze, that's a great idea with a voice tweet as well. And then also,
is there a length limitation on that, Madeline?
2 minutes and 20 seconds is the maximum but you want it short anyway. You want it to be short, like an Instagram story type, just enough to grab attention, to get people excited about joining. Also an idea it made me think of, Suze, when you're talking about newsletters. So another idea would be to maybe even think about, Messia, maybe getting some sponsors. And it doesn't have to be like paid sponsors. People always think sponsor means you're getting money. Not necessarily. What could be very effective is finding sponsors for trade. And so what the trade would be is maybe there's a publication that has lots of followers, and you could approach them and say, hey, we would love to have you guys sponsor this, or you don't have to give us money, but could you promote it to your newsletter? Could you promote it in some tweets? Can you just get the word out? And what we do in return is we'll say at the beginning and at the end of the room, this room is sponsored by so-and-so. And because there's a huge misconception that it means it's about money, and it does not have to be. You can just trade services. And that could be a great way to get more people to your room and spaces, is aligning with really good sponsors. And I think, publications would be great, but just other related businesses that maybe has a great mailing list or a great following on Twitter or Instagram or even YouTube. So something to think about. That could work out really well.
Yeah. I'm blown away at the advice. I was writing everything that you just said down, but in case I missed it, I'm glad I also have the recording as an option to go back to. I'm definitely going to come back to you as well. to show off on my results.
Awesome. Yes, please do.
But
Yeah.
We would love that. Well, I'm so glad that we were able to give you some, just off the top of our head, some thoughts and ideas that might be helpful. So awesome. So Ron, go ahead, give us some monetization tip, because that would be great too.
Okay, Madeline. This is something I intend to do, but haven't gotten around to yet, just other fish to fry. Consider this. What if you provided your know-how? I'm just making this very general, so I talk to everyone here. You provide your know-how absolutely free. It's something that is going to increase the recipient's success and happiness. It's something that you promise will have a big impact, but you don't charge anything for it. And they choose, the recipient who's had all this, maybe it's daily lessons, and maybe they've had a month of daily lessons, and they've applied it in their world, and they're profiting from it greatly. They're making a lot of money from it. At some point, you begin to say to them, this is totally free to you, and you can keep taking the content and the know-how free for as long as you want. But at some point, if you think it's only fair to pay fees related to the gains you've actually gotten from the know-how I've been delivering to you, then start making payments to me. It could be a voluntary amount, or it could be a Patreon monthly, or whatever. But you're relying on them to decide, based on their own fairness ethic, when to start paying you. And of course, you give examples. You say to someone, if you've been consuming this free for a month and you've made $1 million because of what you learned here, do you think that it would be fair to send me 100,000, 10,000, 1,000? In other words, you can give them examples. You're not demanding it. You're not intimidating them. Maybe I was coming on a little too strong just then. But the idea is you give them some examples and you invoke a fairness ethic, and you ask them at some point, based on the return they've already received, to start paying you. I'd love your thoughts on this. This is the first time I've said anything to the world about this idea, and I'd love some feedback.
That is so interesting. What an interesting concept. But I think the issue with it is that somebody's not going to feel compelled, like, gosh, I learned all this stuff and I made all this money from learning from them. Let me just go write them a big check to thank them. People just don't do that. I think what would work, it certainly doesn't hurt to ask, but I think what would work best is having like a Patreon, or having something that's the next step. And certainly, Susan and I have, talked about, like what could be a next step people could do with us. We're having all this free content each week. We're drawing them in. What could be that next step that we can monetize? And then same thing with my Saturday room that you're part of, Ron, Twitter Audits, where we review Twitter profiles. For those here that don't know, every Saturday at 1:00 Eastern for an hour, me, my good friend Dariana Lozano, George Silverman, and Ron always pops in and helps too. We get on there and we review Twitter profiles, and we help people make their profile as great as it can be, because we all know that was like right now we're in Spaces. What are we all doing? We're looking at everybody's little picture here, tapping on their profiles, looking to see, is this somebody I should follow? Is this somebody I should pay attention to? And so sometimes you got to go back to basics on Twitter and make sure your profile is really, really good and really expresses who you are and what you're doing, what your mission is. So Dariana and I have talked about what would be that next step with us with the Twitter Audits room, because we have a very captive audience. So many people come back week after week. Even if they don't want us to review their profile, they tell me they take notes. They apply all the things they learn to their own profile, which is so awesome. So we're working on putting some resources together. So our next step is some free resources. So if people, want even more, we're going to give them some free resources to help strengthen the relationships even more with our knowledge. And then we're going to start coming up with some different paid programs next after that, something that's a low cost, something that might be a little bit more advanced as a higher cost. And I feel like those are great ways to monetize your knowledge because you're not making people feel guilty. It's an optional thing. I think if people feel like, gosh, I'm getting so much value and I want to support, they'll support. I mean, Patreon is a great example of that. I donate to different organizations I love through their Patreons, especially like animal organizations, different shelters and things that I find on social media. And then I find out they have a Patreon, and I'm happy to set up like a $3 a month or $10, $5, whatever I feel like I can afford on a regular basis, instead of just let me donate a check for a lump sum amount for you guys because I love your mission. Why not just support them ongoing month to month? And so I can definitely see where, these are some easier ways to monetize without making people feel like they're, guilt them into it. So that's my only take on it, Ron. I just feel like, you have a great idea, but I feel like we would make people feel guilty, though,
I wouldn't want them to feel guilty. Another motivation they might have is, and I'm not going to say this elegantly, but I'll get the idea across. A kind of a competition. Okay, 1,000 people gather my know-how. One project I'm involved in is called How to Have Big Creative Breakthroughs at Will. Now, it's capable of showing someone having a creative breakthrough that causes them to start a corporation, which eventually gets acquired for billions of dollars. Now, while they're on the path to that, at some point, if they have a strong fairness ethic, and without my having guilted them, as you say, Madeline, what if they send a payment of $1,000 or $10,000 or $100,000, which is a tiny fraction of what they've gained from the know-how, and I have a kind of friendly contest, which is I just announce who's made the biggest voluntary contribution to date. Okay, right now it's $87,000. And if they want to have their name not known or known, well, their option. So it's an example of what people are doing out of their sense of fairness and integrity and appreciation for the know-how they got. But they had no obligation to pay a penny.
Yeah, that's interesting. Suze, what's your thought on all this?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of felt like you were describing kind of Patreon, but with a much more, obviously a leaning towards how much someone had made off of the knowledge and things. I think it's super interesting. It's the sort of thing that Hosteline talks about a lot on a Monday during his Monetize Monday spaces. I think so, yeah. I think you should jump into that one on a Monday, because he talks around the different ways that people can monetize their skills and their knowledge. So yeah, that definitely sounds like a space that you might be interested in. It's interesting, Madeline, as well, you saying, people don't just put their hand in their pocket because they've consumed a lot of your content. Now, I have been stuck in bed, like literally totally out with COVID for a good 10 days plus. And I have been on YouTube more than I would like to admit during that time. And I've been learning about watercolours, which is something totally brand new to me. But I've found one woman whose channel has really resonated with me to the point that I have actually sought out her Patreon, because I feel like I've consumed so much of her knowledge and so much of her great content that actually I do want to put my hand in my pocket and give her some money. I feel like it's the right thing to do. So I think there is kind of this understanding and the sort of tipping point for someone that is constantly consuming the same person's content and really values what it is that they're learning and understanding from that person, where people are perhaps willing to put their hand in their pocket and pay some money. So it's a really interesting conversation and really interesting concept. So thanks so much for bringing it up, Ron.
That is. And I love what you said. I mean, watching these videos and you felt compelled to do that. And that's awesome. I think the great takeaway lesson here is that if you have a Patreon, if you have the ability for somebody to tip, you have something, you got to be sure to let them know because they don't know what they don't know. And I'm the first to admit I'm terrible at like telling people, hey, if you're getting a lot out of this today, you can tip Susan and I because we have that tip feature on our Twitter mobile, but it was more like a novelty, right? When we all got that last year, a few people tipped us because it was, they wanted to try it. And I mean, I had people tip me because they told me, I learned so much from you. I'm happy to do this. And they did like a one-time $5, $10, $20. But it was also a novelty thing. And I think that novelty is worn off. It's my fault. I don't think to tell people, hey, if you get a lot out of this today, feel free to tip me. But also I'm not 100% comfortable saying that.
Oh, I don't know. It's really forward.
It is forward. So I'm not very comfortable.
I mean, I'm terribly, terribly British and I won't talk about money, so I won't be asking you for any. But yeah, it isn't something that I would go out of my way to say. But particularly with this YouTuber, I realised I'd watched so many of her videos. They are really well produced. They were telling me exactly what I wanted to know. They were coming up in the search. No matter what I put in there, it was always kind of taking me back to her. And probably because I was watching so much of her stuff, it was some kind of super fan. I may have some kind of stalker's black mark against me, but forgive me, I have literally, that's all I've been able to do. But the thing was, I thought, right, well, I'd like to buy this paint set that she's talking about, and she had affiliate links for Amazon in her comment, in her notes, but they were for the USA and Canada. So actually I couldn't even buy the thing and make sure that she got kind of a little percentage of that back. So I did. I had to go looking to see if she had a Patreon, to see if there was a way that I could pay her for this great content. But I did do that. And as I say, I think as a creator, I think it's all of those things we hear so often. If you're creating quality content consistently, and, really having that open relationship with the people who are consuming your content, then I do think you build such a relationship. Whether or not that's a two-way thing like on social audio, or whether it's completely one way on YouTube, I'm literally just watching her on a recorded video that she's done. That's the point at which you start to build that relationship and where the monetization comes in, I think.
What if I said to them, my marketing said to them, use our content with no obligation at absolutely no cost. All we ask is two things. One is that you quantify the gains you got so we can tell the world that this has tremendous return. And secondly, that you consider, but you have no obligation to do so, that you consider when you're ready, when you're sure these gains have taken place, that you start paying 5% of that to us as a recommended amount, just 5%.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept. And, people like to be showcased and like to talk about how well they've done with things. And I'm sure that would appeal. If you've done really well, then you're likely to want to see your name, promoted around, and potentially that pushes you out for more business and more people to know who you are and kind of is to your advantage. So, yeah, super interesting concepts, super interesting ways of doing things.
Well, thank you for the feedback. I really appreciate it.
Hey, Rafi.
Hi.
Thank you for being so patient and waiting.
Oh, not a problem. A couple things. Miss Sia, I sent you a tweet. I would love to connect with you about your mission. And then the other thing is, when I think of monetization and supporting a creator, I want to know how to fill that gap of what you taught me and how to execute it. So I would pay, if I found something really good, I would pay to know how to execute it, or to know how to do it faster or something like that. So that's what I look for when I look for, supporting someone, or someone that literally gives you like endless value, like shows you everything, doesn't leave anything out. I've done that where I've then tipped them or gave them the little gift thing on YouTube or anything like that. But for me, for a Patreon, yes, but like these little tip jars and stuff, I think it's really but you have to promote it just like anything else. Like Nobody, so many people talk about having a podcast. If you don't tell people you don't have a podcast, I mean, that's silly. You go live somewhere, you're live in a Twitter space, or you're live, anywhere, and you don't mention your podcast and you have one. So it's kind of the same thing. You have to promote what you have. Maybe not necessarily just come out and say it's a tip jar, but support or something to kind of lead them to that direction. But yeah, for me, that's what I would pay for, is like execution, or how to do what you just taught me faster or easier, or, anything like that.
Yeah, thanks for sharing your thoughts on that. I think the least friction is Patreon. I think Patreon's the easiest way to go, because it's so easy to just say, hey, you like all this stuff? Join my Patreon, because I have even more. By supporting me, you get even more. And I think that just comes off the best way, without no pressure. I always say to myself, I really like this content. I want to support them. So I'm going to go sign up for the Patreon. I don't feel that pressure. I feel like it's on me. I mean, Patreon is super cool. I mean, that came out years ago, back when I was in the music business, and it was started. This is an interesting story. I'll wrap it up because I know Susan it's late. We're over our hour, and Susan's in the UK, so it's late over there. She's got to go. But I just want to say, Patreon was developed by this musician who became very popular on YouTube. Him and his wife started this YouTube and were able to fully monetize it, and they made a ton of money as musicians with their videos. Their band's still around. It's called Pomplamoose. It's a really strange name, but they are very talented musicians. They made these really great videos, mostly covers, and they did incredibly well, and they made great money. And then YouTube years back decided, we're not going to pay out as much as we used to these creators. So a lot of these YouTubers, especially those musicians, lost significant income that they were getting. And so what Jack Conte, he's the guy in the band, he decided to start this new thing called Patreon. I'm thinking it was maybe 2015, maybe 2014. So it's been around a while. And he developed it really for creators like musicians, artists, eventually podcasters started using it. Now you'll see, like what I mentioned earlier, like these like charities and animal rights organizations that I like to support. People are using it for all kinds of things. But he wanted to come up with a way where it's kind of like Kickstarter, but instead of you paying one time to a Kickstarter, you can support this creator every month. And I think it's such a great model. And I think it's the least amount of friction. I think it's just the easiest way to get people to come be a part of it and pay, monetize your efforts without feeling like you're begging for it. Because when I'm like, who was it said? Suze or Rafi, one of y'all mentioned that, you look to see if there's, I guess it was you, Suze, said you look to see if there was a Patreon that they had, that YouTuber, right? When you were watching those videos. And so I do that too, because Patreon is so well known now, is so well established. And there's a YouTuber I really like, and he was saying, and this is very much paralleling what you're talking about here. Love this YouTuber. I love his videos every week. He does these weekly, love everything he puts out. And I kept thinking, gosh, I sure like to support him, but he doesn't have any options to support him. And then he started saying about a month ago, I'm going to start a Patreon. I thought, thank God, because I'll be first in line. I'll pay. I'll give him some money every month because I want to support him. I love what he puts out, and I look forward to his new video every week on YouTube. Like I just can't believe there's somebody I want to look for. I've never been like that with YouTube. I certainly love, different YouTube accounts and content that comes out regularly, but I found a YouTuber I really like and always look forward to. So he has a Patreon now, and I'm happy to be one of the supporters. And then you get these extra perks being the supporter, which makes you love them even more. So I think it's such a win-win. And that's why I'm really enjoying this whole NFT space, because it is very, very similar. I know people right now that don't understand NFTs are really hung up on what we hear in the media, which is expensive JPEGs. And that's not really what it's about. It's about you're basically buying into a membership to a community. That's what it really is. And it's giving me lots of ideas of what I could do with this down the road. And who knows, maybe down the road, Susan and I will have some kind of special NFT project for all things audio as a way for people to support and be part of our community together. So interesting how this whole Web3 is moving and where this is so early. We don't even know half of what we could do with this yet. But
yes. Let's make that happen, Madeline. Let's make that happen.
yes. That's why I'm learning it all now while it's new and trying to understand and grasp it. But I can tell you it is very similar to Patreon. It is all about being part of a community with other people. And there's opportunities, to flip these and make money. It's a lot like collectibles, like trading cards and stuff. There's a lot of different aspects to it. But I'm still in the early stages of learning all about it. But for now, I would say if you're trying to monetize your knowledge, monetize your community, Patreon right now, I think is a great way to do it. Thank you to all of our speakers who came on and shared so much great stuff. And we're available in all of your favorite podcast apps. We're out there, All Things Audio. You can also go to allthingsaudiopodcast.com as well.
You certainly can. And you can catch us here on Twitter and use the hashtag AllThingsAudio, and we'll pick that up throughout the week. So that's it for this week. But thank you so much to everyone that's been here in the space with us and those of you listening. And we'll catch up with you next week.
Bye, everybody.